In a world shaped by fiery rivalries and ideological battles, one question lingers: what could have happened if the Cold War never existed? Picture this: the world divided, not by just geography, but by competing ideologies that reshaped nations, cultures, and lives. The Cold War, a term we often hear tossed around, is more than just a historical period. It's a gripping tale of power, fear, and resilience that continues to reverberate through our lives today. As you watch this, you might be wondering how such a conflict, so deeply rooted in politics, could have touched every corner of the globe and why it matters now, even decades later. Trust me, what comes next will leave you with insights you never expected. To fully grasp the intricacies of the Cold War, we have to turn back the clock to the aftermath of World War II, an era filled with both hope and uncertainty. The world lay in tatters, economies were collapsing, and nations were desperate for stability. Out of the wreckage emerged two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Each offered a compelling vision for the future but stood firmly on opposite ends of the ideological spectrum, the US promoting capitalism and democracy, while the USSR advocated for communism. This stark division set the stage for what we now call the Cold War, a term first coined in the late 1940s. The first question that comes to mind is, how did a rivalry escalate to such a global scale? Events like the Berlin blockade in 1948 showed the world how greatly tensions had risen. When the Soviets attempted to cut off West Berlin from the Allies, America didn't back down. Instead, they launched the Berlin Airlift, providing vital supplies and support to the citizens of West Berlin. This wasn't merely a strategic move, it was an emphatic statement: the free world wouldn't yield. As you might guess, this was just the beginning of a series of conflicts and confrontations where both sides would continuously push each other to the brink of war without ever actually declaring it. And while we discuss this game of geopolitical chess, it's vital to note the human cost behind these strategic decisions. Imagine being a family caught in the crossfire, living in fear, not knowing what the next day would bring. During these times, ordinary lives were affected more than we can imagine. Children had to grow up learning how to duck and cover from potential nuclear blasts, all while their parents were grappling with the pressing anxiety of espionage and conspiracy. This was the reality of living under the shadow of mutual assured destruction. So, what fueled this fierce rivalry? One of the most significant catalysts was the pursuit of nuclear weapons. The bomb dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki not only ended World War II, it sparked an arms race that would dominate the Cold War. The United States had set the precedent, and the Soviet Union was not about to be left behind. By 1949, they successfully tested their own atomic bomb, triggering a frantic escalation that would lead to both countries stockpiling thousands of nuclear weapons. What exactly drove such a reckless competition? The fear of losing supremacy and the belief that security could only be achieved through military might play a significant role. As we venture deeper into this narrative, we can't overlook the importance of propaganda. Both sides learned swiftly that the battle for hearts and minds was as crucial as any military confrontation. The United States, with its glitzy imagery of the American dream, pitted itself against the stark, hard-edged portrayal of the Soviet way of life. You might be wondering how effective these strategies really were. Surprisingly, while both nations painted their opponent as the ultimate evil, the impact was anything but simple. People yearned for the promise of prosperity and liberty, and this yearning often dictated their views and actions. Let's throw in an unexpected twist here: consider the role of culture during the Cold War. It was not just a time of intense military strategy or political negotiations, it was also a period of immense cultural exchange and confrontation. The era birthed the space race, a thrilling competition to achieve milestones in space exploration. Remember when Yuri Gagarin, a Soviet cosmonaut, became the first human in space in 1961? The US was not far behind, launching the Apollo missions, culminating in the iconic moon landing in 1969. Each achievement was loaded with symbolism, reinforcing the idea of national pride and providing a unique avenue for the two superpowers to flex their muscles, not just militarily but scientifically and culturally as well. However, as riveting as this may sound, not everything was simply an exhilarating race. It also generated fear, especially when nations pushed the boundaries of technology and weaponry. Did you know that during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, the world teetered on the brink of nuclear war? The discovery of Soviet missiles in Cuba sent shockwaves across the globe. For 13 harrowing days, millions lived in a state of sheer anxiety, contemplating the unthinkable, a nuclear confrontation between superpowers. This revelation raises an essential question: how did the world change after this close call, and what lessons could we glean from it? The aftermath of the Cuban Missile Crisis was indeed profound. Both nations realized that they had to find a way to communicate and potentially resolve their differences. This realization led to the establishment of the Hotline Communication System, a direct line between Washington and Moscow that aimed to prevent misunderstandings that could spiral into catastrophic conflict. Undoubtedly, its creation underscores an unexpected critical lesson of the era: in times of immense strife, dialogue and diplomacy are vital for survival. Yet, these tensions were not limited to direct confrontations between the US and the USSR. The Cold War permeated through numerous regions worldwide, each colored by its own local conflicts, alignments, and ideologies. In Korea, the Korean War, 1950 to 1953, was a proxy battleground that showcased the divide between communism and democracy, leading to a pall of division that still exists on the Korean peninsula today. The war's impact on civilians, families torn apart, cities destroyed, left indelible scars and legacies that resonate more than half a century later. Following Korea, the Vietnam War further exacerbated the international tension of the time. Associated with the domino theory, where one nation falling to communism could trigger a chain reaction throughout a region, American involvement escalated dramatically in the 1960s. You might be wondering how such a conflict became synonymous with the broader Cold War narrative. It's simple: Vietnam became a battleground for ideological supremacy, drawing in forces who were both defending and propelling the communist cause into a bloody conflict that claimed millions of lives and altered the course of American foreign policy for decades. Speaking of lives lost, it's crucial to shed light on the human experience and the everyday struggles faced by those enduring the consequences of this broader global chess game. The harsh realities of innocent civilians caught in political maneuvers cannot be overstated. Families and entire communities found themselves displaced, suffering from the unyielding consequences of ideologies they had little to do with. This touches on a poignant question: how do ordinary people find meaning and hope amidst the chaos stirred by governments and leaders far removed from their everyday lives? The global impact of the Cold War extended beyond direct conflicts. As nations aligned themselves either with NATO or the Warsaw Pact, countries caught in between saw their fates changed irreversibly. Latin America, Africa, and Asia, brimming with resources, became battlegrounds for ideological influence. The CIA and KGB were not merely spying on each other, they were both invested in overthrowing governments, swaying elections, and even orchestrating coups in various regions. The ramifications of these covert operations echoed throughout history, creating long-lasting instability and igniting new conflicts. The rivalry indoctrinated a fear of the other that permeated through society, leading to a culture of suspicion and mistrust. The phrase Red Scare might resonate with you. It's a term that embodies the fear of communism infiltrating the United States during the late 1940s to mid-1950s. Not just a political movement, it became part of the American psyche, influencing media, education, and individual lives. Families were torn apart over suspicions, etc., and innocent lives were ruined as talented individuals were blacklisted, losing careers simply due to fears that may have been unfounded. And speaking of fears and influences, let's not overlook the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, a powerful symbol of change that marked the end of the Cold War. When the wall fell, it wasn't just a wall that crumbled, it was an entire worldview. People celebrated not only the end of a physical barrier but also the dissolution of an ideology that had stratified their lives for decades. This monumental event raised profound questions about identity, freedom, and the future. What might have seemed like a distant geopolitical battle now appeared as an emerging, shared human experience, leaving individuals to grapple with a new reality, one that came at the cost of immense sacrifice. As we approach a pivotal transition point in our journey through the Cold War saga, it's important to reflect on the lasting legacy of this period. What lessons can modern society take from the intricate web of alliances, conflicts, and negotiations that define the 20th century? The Cold War did not envelop the world in a vacuum. It engaged nations, ideologies, and yes, even institutions that are very much alive today. Could it be that understanding the multidimensional impacts of the Cold War can better equip us to deal with today's geopolitical landscape? This question leads us toward an intriguing analysis of how modern tensions, whether they stem from nationalism, territorial disputes, or ideologically driven conflicts, draw inspiration from the historical precedents set during this tumultuous time. But before we delve deeper into those implications and revelations, remember, the world we live in today is inextricably linked to the Cold War, and the global impacts still echo in our policies, cultures, and societies. As we continue to explore the consequences and legacies of this epic period in history, there are more compelling stories, unexpected twists, and vital lessons that await us. Stay tuned for the second half, where we'll unravel the intricate ways this legacy shapes our present and what it reveals about our future. As we delve deeper into the legacy of the Cold War, the implications of this period extend far beyond the animosities and tensions that defined global geopolitics. The echoes of policy decisions and ideological standpoints resonate strongly in contemporary issues, from international relations to domestic politics. The lessons gleaned from the Cold War's successes and failures can serve as vital reference points for navigating the increasingly complex world of today. Take, for instance, the concept of nuclear deterrence. This strategic doctrine ensured that the fear of mutual destruction kept both superpowers from direct military conflict. Despite its grim nature, this framework shaped defense policies for decades. However, the enduring challenge remains: how do we apply such lessons in an era characterized by the diversification of nuclear capabilities? New players on the stage, countries such as North Korea, Iran, and previously rogue states, complicate the doctrine of deterrence. The Cold War teaches us that diplomacy must accompany military preparedness to foster stability and decrease the risk of escalation. Could we not see a renewed emphasis on disarmament and non-proliferation as a product of these understandings? Moreover, the Cold War offers insights into the pernicious nature of ideological warfare. As witnessed during that era, nations aligned themselves along polarized lines, exacerbating divisions that transcended borders. Today, we find ourselves confronted with modern ideological battles, whether they manifest in nationalism, religious extremism, or even corporate influence over democracies. The dichotomy of East versus West, capitalism versus communism, acted as a historical backdrop that illuminated a timeless truth: the human propensity to segregate, fear, and marginalize those deemed other. The Cold War also cultivated an expansive array of conflict resolution strategies that continue to inform diplomacy today. The series of summits between leaders, where facing-off rivals dared to shake hands and strike compromises, illustrated that constructive engagement is often more fruitful than belligerence. The dialogues initiated during the Helsinki Accords or the Geneva Summit set historical precedents for modern negotiations. They demonstrate that acknowledging one's adversary is not merely a route to capitulation, it can be a pathway to lasting peace. In our current geopolitical climate, where polarization threatens dialogue, revisiting these lessons can be enlightening. It is also crucial to remember the socio-political reverberations felt outside of the superpowers. The proxy wars and ideological struggles birthed in various regions during the Cold War have left lasting scars. In many nations, local conflicts fueled by Cold War dynamics have led to instability, civil wars, and ongoing violence. The repercussions of American and Soviet intervention, often viewed as support for allies, still echo in regions grappling with the aftermath of political and economic turmoil, such as in Afghanistan, Vietnam, and parts of Central America. The impact on everyday civilians deserves a human-centric examination. The anxieties of living in a world on the brink of nuclear annihilation shaped the generational psyche in both superpowers, creating collective narratives of fear and resilience. From the iconic duck and cover drills during the early years to the eventual Generation X's grappling with the inherited legacies of Cold War politics, the era shaped subconscious cultural motifs that persist in media, literature, and art. Consider Hollywood's transformation during this time. American cinema became a tool for propaganda, molding public perception while engaging with themes of existential threat, heroism, and the struggle for freedom. But it also mirrored the fears and aspirations of the American populace, ultimately becoming a narrative catharsis for the frustrations tied to Cold War politics. Iconic movies from that period, such as Dr. Strangelove and The Manchurian Candidate, encapsulated a society grappling with paranoia and absurdity amidst the Cold War landscape. Switching our lens to Eastern Europe, the fall of communism illuminated a human desire for agency and autonomy. The peaceful revolutions that led to regime changes in nations like Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia showcased the power of civil movements, an ongoing theme that resonates globally today. Societies that endured authoritarian shadows seek to cultivate democratic environments, support free expression, and advocate for human rights, each a reflection of lessons painfully learned during the oppressive epochs of the Cold War. But what of the technological advancements ignited during this era? The space race exemplified how competition can yield monumental achievements. While it began as an effort to assert ideological supremacy, it resulted in extraordinary technological progresses, advancements that paved the way for modern telecommunications, satellite technology, and even the Internet. The investment made in science and technology during the 20th century not only resulted in national pride but fundamentally altered lives worldwide. Today, the marriage of competition and innovation remains a potent force, driving developments in fields ranging from artificial intelligence to medical sciences. On a more philosophical level, we must also address the personal and cultural identity shaping the Cold War instilled in generations. People habituated to thinking in binaries, right versus wrong, west versus east, often suffer from oversimplification in understanding complex human experiences. In a world that increasingly reflects ambiguity and interconnectivity, it's crucial to cultivate a more nuanced comprehension of identity, migration, and cultural exchange influenced by lived experiences across different histories. Looking ahead, the discourse surrounding the potential for a new Cold War looms large. As tensions rise between powers like the United States, Russia, and China, the question remains: are we at the precipice of another ideological confrontation? If history teaches us anything, it's that enduring rivalries require vigilant scrutiny, not only of political moves but also of socio-economic conditions and human motivations. The Cold War's legacy reminds us that misunderstandings can fester into crises and that proactive measures, diplomatic or otherwise, must be employed to navigate emerging challenges. Moreover, the role of international institutions, such as the United Nations or numerous bilateral agreements, remains paramount in ensuring that nations coexist without the specter of annihilation looming overhead. Learning from the past involves committing to open dialogue and engaging diplomacy uniquely suited to our contemporary challenges, an acknowledgement that every action can potentially ripple through to vast consequences. As we reflect on the intricate web of events and decisions that define the Cold War era, we must also confront the potential of new narratives. After all, history isn't static, it continuously informs the present while allowing us to carve new paths for the future. The Cold War serves as both a cautionary tale and a reservoir of wisdom, insights that can inspire movements for peace, advocacy for justice, and the quest for a more integrated perspective that embraces the complexity of our shared humanity. So, what have we learned? What insights can we distill from this intricate saga? This sweeping journey remolds our understanding of not only historical events but also the systemic mechanisms that govern contemporary society. The exploration of power dynamics, ideological confrontations, and the human cost associated with conflict should compel us to approach our global interactions with empathy, awareness, and proactive engagement. In conclusion, the Cold War era, while defined by stark divisions and rivalries, also hints at the profound resilience of the human spirit and the potential for dialogue amid turmoil. As we navigate today's geopolitical landscape, let us remember that the past holds the keys to unlocking collective progress, a reminder that, in a world often driven by fear and mistrust, understanding, cooperation, and empathy remain our greatest assets. What lessons learned might emerge in a future free from the specter of ideological hostility? The journey is ongoing, and it beckons our greatest hopes and aspirations for a world unified not by fear, but by understanding and shared humanity.